So hello all again and welcome to Living Conversations. I'm Joseph Bonner and I'm joined by
Keanna.
So in advance of the upcoming local election, we're recording another episode right here in Bankside, where we hope to bring you closer to politics here in the London Borough of Southwark, giving you an insight into who our leaders are and what they're doing for you. Joining us today is Cllr Sarah King, who is not only the councillor for Champion Hill, but actually the leader of Southwark Council itself. So very grateful and very welcome to you here. So elections on May the 5th, Sarah. How are you feeling at this point?
That's a big question to start with. So a bit tired is the honest answer. I think this is... I think it's a different election, and I think obviously people will be following the polls and what's being covered in the media. So I'm conscious that the Southwark Labour is out there campaigning, very much talking about its track record, having some wonderful conversations on the door, and I think that is important. I think people often forget that actually campaigning is a wonderful opportunity to go out and meet residents, to talk to them about how they are, get a real sense of what their priorities are. But it is a different election in the sense that over the years we've had a strong Liberal Democrat group here in Southwark, and we were used to campaigning against each other. But we are this year also focused on the Greens, probably more in the middle and the south of the borough, but also the Conservatives down in Dulwich Village. And also for the first time ever, we'll obviously have Reform candidates standing in the council election again. So it is a very competitive election. And with that comes, I think, a lot more campaigning, but I think that's the right thing for us to be doing.
Great. So tired, but enough energy in the tank.
Yeah, definitely. And also,
I
have to say, and I think when you talk to people outside of politics, they often look at me slightly confused at this point. I love being out on the doorstep, and actually one of the best bits of campaigning and being council leader is meeting residents without question.
Well, that's something we hear a lot from our local candidates, which is reassuring to hear that message from you. And before I hand over to Keanna for her some questions, I should say that Living Bankside as an organisation is apolitical. We welcome conversations like these with people like yourself from Labour. We've had Councillor Victor Chamberlain also on this sofa to give the views of the Liberal Democrats, and we hope that the leader representing the Green Party will also join us here on the sofa for a conversation. But we as an organisation at Living Bankside are apolitical, and we as individuals representing the organisation are apolitical. But of course we wish all the candidates well in the weeks ahead. So Keanna.
So you spoke about, being on the doorstep, getting to know those residents, but we want to understand you as a person. And so if you could just give some insight into your experiences in the borough, sort of growing up in South London and sort of how that shaped your character.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Lewisham. I went to school, my secondary school was in Greenwich. And so I'm very, very rooted in South London. It's a place that I love. I went off to university and then for about 10 years moved out of London and lived in Reading.
Oh, wow.
And London I missed it so much. And I spent quite a lot of time in Reading trying to find ways to move back, and then finally did, it would be about 15 years ago, and settled in Peckham. Well, first moved back to East Dulwich, and then moved over to Peckham Rye kind of after a couple of years. So I love South London. And to me, it really is its diversity. Living in other parts of the country, I think one of the things that I always missed was the vibrancy, the diversity, what London has to offer, whether it's kind of what's in your community around you, but also thinking about where we are today, the wonderful kind of cultural and community assets that we have across the whole place.
I mean, I definitely can second that, myself going off to university in Warwick, seeing sort of the Midland lifestyle versus the London lifestyle was a very big culture shock. And then, like you said, that sort of yearning to be back and in that culture and the vibrancy and the hustle and bustle. London in itself has its own feeling, and then South London within that also, I think, personally, I'd like to say is one of the best parts of London. So I definitely can attest to that.
Totally.
But
there you are, challenge any viewers in North London.
Definitely. But when you are in London, what sort of things do you like to get up to?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So lots of people know I cycle everywhere, which I think is the best way to travel around Southwark. It's also, I love the fact it's got safer and safer and more inclusive, and I'm doing it with lots of other people. I love it because you get to see everything. You kind of, that bit about that connection to your community is brilliant. I'm an avid swimmer. I really like to cold water swim, but my perfect place to do it is in the sea, so I don't do it that often, but I do love to escape to the seaside. And the other thing I took up quite recently is I've taken up weightlifting.
Oh, wow.
Which is so a friend of mine suggested that they thought I'd like it. Absolutely love it. I am not a morning person, and I now get up in the morning and go and lift weights.
It's a great way to start.
But also, that's made me sound really healthy in a way that I'm not sure is fair. So no, I love to be out in places like the bars, the restaurants of the borough are that bit that to me makes South London as well. So that cultural bit's really important.
Wonderful. I definitely think London is one of those places where you could wake up at any time, go outside and just know there's something for you to do, somewhere where you can belong and sort of meet someone, do an activity. And I think that is one of the selling points of South London.
Definitely. I can remember when I went to university, I couldn't understand. I was going to say it's a long time ago, so I can say it because I don't smoke anymore. I couldn't understand that you couldn't buy a pint of milk and 20 cigarettes all the way through the night. And it was just like a real moment of realisation how different towns are.
Yeah. Joseph?
I think you're going to go on to some good, relevant, quick-fire questions.
There's one really quick fire question.
Oh, they are. But you mentioned about going out. Do you have a favourite restaurant in Southwark that you can?
Oh, that's really hard. There's too many.
Claim, or will you disappoint a lot of other people?
I could disappoint loads of people.
Or a favourite pub or bakery or cafe?
So I'm torn between two favourite pubs, the Ivy House and the Waverley Arms, which are my two locals, very close to me. And one of my favourite restaurants is Mr. Bow in Peckham. But there are many, and I could keep going for ages.
Very good. Well, now on to your time as councillor. What was it that first inspired you to run for local office, and was there a cause you remember that really animated you for the first time?
Oh, that's interesting. So I grew up in a really political family. So I grew up with a mum and dad who active members of the Labour Party. Election day was like almost it was a big day in my family because kind of the house was turned over to be the committee room. I remember as a child going on marches in London. So I've always had that very, very political kind of background. I think in terms of kind of formative moments in politics, so I said that I grew up in Lewisham, I went to school in Greenwich. I think I really remember Stephen Lawrence's murder being a really formative moment in my teenage years, and I think that is something that has stayed with me. We still talk about it as councillors together. We talk about our views, how our community feels about the Metropolitan Police. So I think that's a real moment that I will always think of in terms of feeling a level of personal political activism. But when I decided to stand, I was really strongly encouraged by friends actually in the Labour Party. And I think there was a bit for me about a little bit of putting my money where my mouth is, and that I've been involved in the Labour Party for a long time. I was quite well known at being quite critical. Why weren't we doing more? Why weren't we going faster? And the opportunity to stand came up. And I think I'd reached a point in my professional career where I wanted to put more focus into public service, very honestly.
And thinking about that campaigning and what delivered and what you expected, and also in the same vein, is the job of being a councillor what you expected?
So I think there are things that frustrate me. So when I talk about being a councillor and also being council leader, I think it's quite similar. I would describe about 70% of it is amazing, if that makes sense. It's kind of like you meet wonderful people, community groups, what people are doing, volunteering in their lives, the challenges that they face. That bit is, I love being out talking to people. I suppose the bits that I find harder are how slow it is to affect change. And the job I had, I used to run a business with two other people, and we were quite a small business, and we could make a decision and basically implement it by the end of the week. And actually kind of that satisfaction of being able to kind of do things quickly, and then realising in a council context, kind of as a councillor and then as a council leader, just actually change is really hard to affect. And actually working in the public sector, it takes time to kind of take a decision and then start to implement it. So I think that's been my biggest learning, is that needing to deal with that difference, but also remain tenacious with it so you can get things done.
And therefore, how do you keep that tenacity going? What drives you as a local representative? Knowing that you wear two hats as a local councillor
absolutely.
and then running the show, as it were.
And I
through the
suppose
street.
local government to me is really tangible. So I think people often kind of make the comparison to being a councillor or being an MP. What I love about being a councillor is how close you are to your residents. So small thing in my ward. So I've been a councillor since 2014. We have, as councillors, been representing our local residents for so long to get a zebra crossing on Grove Lane. And there have been a whole host of reasons. TfL used to be opposed to it. There were challenges with the buses. There were worries about sight lines. There were funding, etc. There was the need for consultation. That zebra crossing, it starts work next week, okay? And it's honestly a campaign that is almost slightly embarrassing to say it's taken like nearly 14 years, but being able to actually see that change, cross the road, be able to talk to residents about delivery, that to me is like the most rewarding and inspiring thing. Or just helping people in terms of casework. I remember when I first became leader, I was at my first cabinet meeting and a resident met me as I was going into the cabinet meeting to give me a bouquet of flowers to say thank you for some casework that I'd solved 2 days ago. And it's kind of like that to me, that connection between what we do as councillors and affecting change in people's lives, and also listening and understanding their priorities. That's the bit that keeps me going always.
I can imagine. It's interesting that as a cyclist, you're keen to see a zebra crossing installed as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can see the greater good.
I was going to say the zebra crossing stops the bikes going that way, but it also helps the bike lane the other way. So yeah, it's about getting it right.
Yeah, it's always think as a cyclist too, and a pedestrian, and as an occasional driver, the roads don't belong to any one group of people.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. It's for all of us in each of those roles to behave well. Great.
Keanna, over to you.
So I'd love to get some insight into sort of what your team's been up to lately. You know, it's been quite a busy season for you. I know you've been quite ambitious in terms of solving Southwark's housing crisis.
Absolutely.
But we've seen some reports showing that there's been a 77% increase in children in social housing between 2020 and 2024. And I just want to sort of know, do you feel like the council's doing enough? Do you think more could be done?
Oh, I always think more could be done on housing. It is, so in terms of residents' priorities, I think from kind of in terms of casework, in terms of what things that come through to the council and the residents' insights work that the council does, housing, cost of living crisis and community safety kind of top the list every time. We're really proud that we've built so many new council homes, and we often talk about being the largest council developer of council homes, and it's an important thing to recognise because a huge amount of political work, but also council work has gone into doing that. But it is the tip of the iceberg in terms of actually addressing a housing crisis. So we want to redouble our efforts in that space. We're doing a huge amount of work. Lobbying government to make it easier for us to build council homes ourselves, but it's also making sure that we get the best possible deals out of developers when it comes to genuinely affordable housing, and it's looking across the piece because that housing crisis it affects everyone. And I think when I first became a councillor, we saw it particularly among some of the poorest people in society, but actually it's affecting everyone across the board, and finding the right solution in every one of those spaces. I cannot imagine a situation in the kind of near to medium future where housing doesn't remain the priority of the council. And also as a council landlord as well, I'm really conscious that we own so many of our own homes. We are a landlord. We must be a good landlord to our tenants and our leaseholders. So making improvements to our own housing department and how it works is absolutely key.
So what would you say would be the top priorities in terms of those improvements?
So those improvements, so we have made some, the improvements we're delivering at the moment are very much about investing in our existing council homes in terms particularly in terms of health and safety. We did a lot of work following the regulator coming in to inspect to make sure that our investment plans were really closely tied to what the absolute kind of compliance priorities are. But there's a lot going on in that space. So it's a huge huge bit for me about how we engage and consult our leaseholders and our tenants about what their priorities are. It's making sure that if we are looking at regeneration schemes in the future, but particularly things like the redevelopment, the Aylesbury, that we're doing that with residents and making sure that we have that relationship and that our plans reflect their priorities. And also some of it's just simply about customer service and trust and respect. It's making sure that when people report an issue, it's taken seriously and that issue is responded to quickly. So, but yeah,
that's definitely a big thing a lot of people sort of mention when it comes to Southwark Council, is that they don't feel heard.
Agreed.
Or they'll make a report but there's no follow-up, there's no response, and so it's sort of like, what's the point?
Yeah,
so I think definitely going forward, like you mentioned, it will be very important how you build those relationships with people, and not just building the relationship but also sustaining it. Definitely. And showing, I heard what you said, this is what we've done, and we're going to continue listening. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how you go about that.
Definitely. And I think one of the things when we need to get right is that people come to us and report an issue or a concern, and I think there's a bit saying, recognising how important that is to a resident, and actually get the respect that is due in that space, that they have proactively come to us to say there's a problem that needs to be solved. I also think sometimes we aren't clear enough when a problem can't be solved. So there's almost when I took over as cabinet member for council homes, it almost felt like if something was too difficult or we didn't have the money, we didn't actually have an honest conversation and say we can solve this, can't necessarily solve this bit today or tomorrow, but it will go into a long-term investment plan, or we need to work with a different partner, or we need to campaign to the government to get more money into the system. But it's having that really open and honest conversation, which I think is key.
Joseph?
Just because housing is such an issue, just to carry on a little bit, and not trying to put you on the spot, but okay, just to give context, I guess, to some of the words, to maybe look at some numbers. So I think it's the financial year targets are set for, say, 24, 25. How many houses were built, new homes, by the council in that period?
Not
the exact number.
No, it's okay. So we've built 2,500 new council homes over the 4-year period. I'm not sure I can divide it up between those years, so it's 2,500 since in the last administration that we've built in terms of council homes.
Right, so that's from 25, 26 financial year, 4 years.
So it would have been since the last election, if that makes sense. So it was the electoral term that I put the number on it.
And so 2,500?
2,500 in that period of time. And I think in the last year it's been about, I think it's just under 700, but I would need to check the figures. Okay.
And in terms of how that makes the target, that's...
in terms of the long-term target?
Well, do you have targets for per year?
So I think the honest answer to that at the moment is we're trying to build as many council homes as we can. We unfortunately had to pause some of our schemes that we had due to the conditions of our housing revenue account. So our housing finances are really constrained due to things like spiralling inflation and interest rates, and also because we need to make sure that we're investing in our existing stock in terms of health and safety and other issues. So we are definitely constrained that there is not enough money to meet our own ambition, I think. So we are looking at every way possible.
And is that the same going forward in the next 7 years?
So going forward, we've set a target of 1.5 genuinely affordable homes for the next 4 years, of which at least 500 would be council homes. I think I want us to exceed that target, and I think if economic conditions improve and also our campaigning to our own government is successful in terms of how to fund social housing going forward, I think we could exceed that.
Good. Well, we wish everyone all the luck with that, of course. And I guess recent economic situations impact on all of that as well.
Yeah, very much so, both in terms of housing, but also kind of the council's funding going for long term, and obviously that's a massive pressure for government as well. So.
Well, it's good to hear you also talk about affordable homes, because that's
absolutely
a big issue right across the borough, right across London as well, because there's almost this donut effect being created in central London, of which we are considered in zone 1 here with Airbnb and other influences and actions just impacting therefore on communities, primary schools closing, and so on and so forth.
When you think about where we started talking about that vibrancy of South East London, that's why that piece about housing is I'm so passionate about. When I think of kind of friends of mine who I grew up with in Lewisham, quite a lot of them live in North Kent now, and that for me is that kind of that demographic change that can happen if we don't solve the housing crisis in its fullest form.
Keanna, I think you have some more.
So your opponents have called into question your being as director of Connect Public Affairs, which a number of its clients being developers. Would you say this is a fair concern for people to have?
I don't, which is a very firm answer.
Okay.
So, but just to take, so I first started working at Connect, it must be about 22 years ago, and I suppose it's a really important part of my life, so I'm actually very proud of what I did at work. I joined at a junior level, worked my way up through the business, was lucky enough to have a management, to do a management buyout with 3 people from its previous owner, and feel very passionately and committed to a business that we grew, training people in terms of doing work in PR, political communications. As part of that, I have worked with property developers, local government, housing associations, all in the space of planning, housing and regen. A lot of that work has been about engaging with government in terms of getting big policy change, in terms of what governments have been looking at over many years. And some of it's been about community consultation on the ground, so looking at some of the work that Living Bankside do in terms of making sure that residents have the opportunity to feed into development plans. I think if developers do that well, they can do it well and they can listen. There are obviously examples of developers who don't do it well and don't listen, and I'm definitely not going to sit here and say that developers all across Southwark get it right in any way, shape or form, but I do think it's an important part of the process. And I think encouraging people to take part in meaningful consultation is really, really important. I also think it's taught me a huge amount that is of benefit to the council in terms of understanding how developers think, what they do and what they're coming to with a planning application. It definitely helped me ask some very, very probing questions of developers over the years in terms of planning committee and in the roles that I've done going forward as well. So it's like fundamentally for me, being council leader is about prioritising the needs of our residents in terms of housing, and that's how I'll use those skills.
I like that you frame it as it shaped your understandings versus leading your decision-making skills, which I think is important to understand because, you know, everything we do sort of shapes how we go about things and sort of the information we then use. But do you think that developers should be more involved in the terms of developing more affordable housing and that the council should be reinforcing this?
Yeah, so fundamentally, in terms of delivering homes that our residents can afford, I think the best partner to do that is the council itself. So actually that's why I'm so kind of aggressively supportive of the council building council homes, and I think making sure we achieve the right conditions for that is absolutely essential. I think in terms of that kind of full scale response to the housing crisis, lots of partners need to play their role. So that is obviously the council. We need to see housing associations delivering what our residents need. And there is a role for developers to be developing too. But when those applications come forward, they need to make sure in my view, they have to be policy compliant and they need to be delivering on those policies which the council has put together for the best of our residents. So it is very much about holding them to account, and it's about making sure that the planning committee approaches every application like that and gets the best for the people of Southwark.
Do you think the council does that successfully?
So that's really interesting. So in terms of decisions the planning committee has recently taken, we've obviously seen it reject planning applications. There was the Elsham scheme in Peckham, which the committee rejected, and that is now going. They have appealed that. The developer has appealed that and taken that out of our hands. We're obviously waiting for an outcome from the planning inspectorate at the moment. And then the other recent challenging one was the one that came forward from British Land, which had a very low percentage of affordable housing in it as well. That wasn't determined by the council. It was captured by the Mayor of London for determination at City Hall. So in terms of the decisions the planning committee is taking, which obviously sits very separately from the leadership in cabinet, I think they spend a huge amount of time going to a lot of detail in terms of those planning applications for them to make that decision. But I do think the challenge is there actually. that doesn't mean for 1 minute we don't need more affordable homes.
Definitely.
Continuing on with, moving on from housing perhaps, but more generally development. And of course, here in Bankside, we've had years, almost 30 years now, with almost intense development in streets all around us. And I want to talk briefly about the NSIL, the National Neighbourhood Community Infrastructure Levy,
Yes.
Which has done enormous good in
Yes.
Southwark by ensuring 25% of the planning charge when any new development is handed over directly to community groups and other organisations, with local ward councillors being able to make those recommendations and decisions, so those improvements can be made locally to where the developments take place. Is that something you're willing to continue and to recommit to in the next period?
Absolutely. That money is there. That money is a tax on development to the benefit of communities, and having that continue is absolutely essential. And it needs to. I think it is very, very important that it's that communities get the opportunity to shape it. The community organisations are involved in how that money is spent, and ward councillors. Yes, I think seeing the fruition of how community infrastructure levy is supporting community, so I actually think is really powerful in terms of making change. And when you look across the whole of the borough, the range of things that are being delivered is quite amazing. So we've got, in some places in the borough, it's obviously delivering greening projects, parks projects, wildlife. In other places, it's making improvement on our estates, which is also really powerful in a situation where the housing finances are so tight. Being able to invest in our existing homes and estates through community infrastructure levy is really helpful.
And could you see that being done more, or in other ways, learning the lessons of this stage?
I think that's right, because some of those projects are kind of being delivered as we speak, so there will always be learnings from those projects. I think we also need to look more fully about how we use Section 106 to make sure that is continuing to be invested in the right way. But also we then have those other pots of money, such as Cleaner, Greener, Safer, neighbourhood funding and devolved highways budgets, and all of those can really, they bind a community around a project as well. So I think there are multiple benefits, because often when you have funding available like that, it actually brings a community together. So when you go to those pitching meetings that we organise locally, one of the other additional benefits I get is that actually community groups get to meet each other and share ideas, share resource, and actually share expertise, which is really powerful.
Yeah, we have some experience of that directly in Living Bankside. I'm glad you mentioned Section 106. I don't know if our viewers and listeners will know what that is, so maybe you can answer that in the question. But is there some way, perhaps in the future, that Section 106 monies can also be distributed in a more local way?
Oh, that's really
like
yeah. So Section 106 is, for those watching it, is Section 106 is another set of contributions that developers made in terms of planning applications when they receive planning permission. Now, I'm in the recesses of my brain at this moment. Is my understanding that some of that is predetermined in terms of it has to offset directly the impact that an planning application is going to have. So there is contributions that must go to social services, must go to education, for example, might go to a health impact. But there could, if there is flexibility in that, I'd be happy to look at it. I think it's just understanding where that flexibility is in those fundings to have community input versus what is a kind of more statutory requirement in terms of supporting other public services.
Because we've had Section 106 now for quite a long time, I think. I don't know how long, but and I know it's been around a long time, compared to NSIL, which is a newer
much newer
instrument, but maybe a time for reviewing
it's really
how
good,
that works and the impact it makes locally, and how it's distributed would be good. And be happy to talk to you further about that.
Yes, very happy to talk to you more.
Back to you, Keanna, I think.
I mean, I think a lot of what we've spoken about today is sort of getting a better understanding. We've spoken largely about housing.
We have actually,
which honestly is reflective of the real life right now. Housing is a major issue in Southwark, and I think a lot of residents can attest to the fact that they don't feel enough is being done. I do personally think a large portion of that is due to the lack of education and understanding surrounding that topic, not necessarily their own fault. I think it's a topic that's not discussed well, partially due to the council sort of privatising certain pieces of information or not making it as accessible to those who it would be most relevant to. So I'd love to get a better understanding of how you will make that more accessible for people going forward? Because you've spoken about having them involved in the process, being on their doorstep, but how are you making them able to engage in the information?
That's really interesting. I would love to have a wider conversation about actually getting to the number of kind of what needs to change. Some of the things that we're doing as a landlord are process-wise, we developed something called the Good Landlord Plan, which is the whole plan for improving the housing department. And part of that includes setting up some new resident boards, so bringing together a board of tenants, a board of leaseholders, to actually challenge us to be better. So they will come together, and we were doing the recruitment for this a couple of months ago. Those boards will actually be there to check we're doing what we say we're doing, and actually challenge us when we're not doing well enough or the focus isn't good enough. So I think having both tenants and leaseholders in that Good Landlord Plan process is really, really important. We've also set up another focus groups, probably is not quite the right word, but we've brought another group of residents together to talk very much about antisocial behaviour on estates, and actually to understand what the challenges actually are, what people's residents are experiencing, but then also make sure the response of the council as a landlord is right. It also means bringing in our community warden team. It means actually doing good engagement with the police as well in terms of resources. And I want to take that. We've started looking at that as a council landlord, but I'm really keen that we extend that to housing associations and actually widen it beyond just our role as a landlord. I think being able to provide clearer information is some of this though as well, and I often think we're not supporting our residents to actually almost navigate the housing waiting list well enough. I think sometimes responses that I've seen go out these are the facts rather than actually giving advice and actually what the best housing solution might be. So organising more open opportunities for people to come and talk to experts, I think, is a really good idea. We kind of do it really well in the welfare, like some in the welfare space at the moment, but actually extending it into housing I think would be really good as well. But yeah, it is, when I think I attended homeowners conference recently to talk to leaseholders about the progress that we've made, I think the cultural change has started in the housing department, but I think I can say that kind of at the top of the organisation, but that doesn't mean it's flowed all the way through at the moment. And that's got to be the priority, that every part of the housing department is open and clear and responsive. And I know that is a journey we're very much still on.
Great, good. Well, you'll be glad maybe to know this is the last question. So if you're successful on May 7th, you'll return as a Labour administration. You'll be able to then see the much vaunted Southwark 2030 project through to its completion. What is it you'd hope to see in the borough by then? And
by 2030?
The 2030.
I would have, as a role as council landlord, I would have wanted the regulator to have come back in and inspected us. They work on a 4-year cycle, and I would want to be able to talk to you in 4 years' time about how that independent regulation has come in and inspected us, and we are demonstrably better than we are. I would love us to. So we got a C3 rating. For me, I want to be a C1 landlord. I don't know the details of that regulatory process, whether you can bump up to at a time, but that's my goal without question. I want to be able to sit here to tell you that I've delivered beyond our council homes targets that we've set for our manifesto, and that we've exceeded them because we have been able to make the case for the money to deliver the council homes. We found the right partners to work with. I suppose on a fundamental level, I would like, in terms of casework, to have seen housing go down the priority list, because we're making a dent and actually making achievements in that space. And I think the other two things I will really judge us on is our role in tackling the cost of living crisis. I think we have provided amazing support over the past 4 years to, I think it's 100,000 families in the borough in some way, but it's a crisis you don't want to be dealing with. So it will be something that I continue to make the case to our government to be solving as well. And then I think my other big one will be around community safety. When I first took over as leader, I was given some figures which I can't quote off the top of my head, but actually I was really struck by how women in particular, but also young people, how unsafe they can feel walking around the borough, particularly after dark. And to me, a sign of success will be that is not the figure that jumps out of our community insights work. That was one that I was really, really struck about. And just talking to people about things like self-imposed curfews, people who don't want to go out after dark, feel scared coming back after a night out. I want to be able to really clearly see that is no longer the case.
Great. And any pet projects, perhaps? A few more zebra
I was going to say a few more zebra crossings.
Or cycle paths.
Cycle paths. I'm just trying to think. I think one of the ones that I would also want to get my teeth into is how we effectively support the voluntary and community sector. I think we're already doing lots of it, but one of the things that I have heard a lot, particularly recently, is groups that either need space and struggle to find space, struggle to find affordable space, and actually how we look at our own assets and the assets of others to be doing that in quite a comprehensive way. So there are brilliant groups out there who have spaces, there are groups who need spaces, but actually getting to the point where there's a very clear, coordinated kind of strategy where people know what they're applying for, and then that the council can work at strategic level to make sure that organisations who frankly do such great work, and the council couldn't do half of what it does without the work of community groups, kind of have a much more strong, solid sense of their future in terms of where their homes are in the borough.
Well, that's a great conversation for us to have. Perhaps another time, something very much Living Bankside would be interested in having a conversation on, and hopefully we'll do that on the other side of the election.
Excellent.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You're a very busy councillor, leader of the council, and I know you've got to go off and do some more campaigning now. So all the best with that. Hopefully the sun continues to shine.
Lovely.
And we're delighted you can spend time with us, and hopefully everyone has enjoyed the conversation online and in the ether. Thank you, Keanna.
Thank you.
Thank you to the team behind it all.
Thank you very much.
Until next time, that is Living Conversations.